Hi, I'm Dave Kindig from Kindig Design and Velocity Channel's Bitch and Rides, and I'm here at the LA Classic Show. We have a great partnership that we've created with Axel Nobel.
For years, Dave Kindig has been known as the calm, brilliant mind behind some of the most stunning custom cars ever built. But recently, fans have been asking what really happened to him and why things around his life and work suddenly feel different. The truth behind his journey is far more surprising than most people realize, and it reveals a side of Dave that few have ever seen. Imagine Salt Lake City in the early 1990s. There are no viral clips of wild builds, no bingeable seasons of custom car shows, just magazines, word of mouth, and grainy photos taped up in garages. Somewhere in that world is a young guy named Dave Kindig. Not in a design school, not in a corporate studio, but at a table sketching cars in the few quiet moments his life allows. He does not have a big budget or famous clients. What he does have is an eye. He notices when a factory body line dies too soon, when a roof line is a little too tall, when a wheel opening ruins the entire side profile of a car by being off an inch too far. At this point, Kindig is not a brand. It is barely more than a dream. Dave and his wife Charity are just two people trying to keep the lights on. He takes on graphic design, pinstriping, small custom paintwork, whatever comes through the door that can keep the family afloat. None of it is glamorous. Some of it pays badly. But his approach is the same in every job. The line has to be right. The striping has to be clean. The smallest piece needs to look like it belongs there. Long before television, long before merch or social media, that stubborn standard started doing quiet work for him. Customers leave the shop and tell their friends that this guy in Utah is different. By the late 1990s, Kindig had become a real shop, not just a side hustle. There is a name on the building, a small team inside, and a growing backlog of projects. It looks like success from the outside, but inside, the pressure never turns off. This is the phase where a lot of small hot rod shops burn out and disappear. The pattern is simple. Too many cars, not enough money. A charismatic owner doing the work of 3 people. Unfinished builds stacking up in corners like unpaid bills. Family responsibilities grow at the same time. Kids, a mortgage, food that needs to be on the table whether the latest customer check clears or not. Dave has a choice. He could chase quick money, blow over paint jobs, cheap flip cars. Good enough, builds that look decent from across a parking lot if you do not stare too long. Instead, he goes in the opposite direction. He doubles down on fit, finish, and design. Kindig does not just restore cars, it rethinks them. Then it puts them back together, as if the factory had secretly hired a custom shop in the first place. That means more hours in every job, more time in the metalwork, more late nights with tape on the floor figuring out the exact stance. On a spreadsheet, it is a bad way to get rich. On the street and at the shows, it becomes a magnet. Through the early 2000s, the jobs got bigger. High-end hot rods, rare muscle cars, customers who are willing to ship their pride and joy across states and leave it in Dave's hands for months or even years. This is where the Kindig look begins to fully solidify. The cars still look like cars. He is not cutting them into cartoon shapes or chasing shock value. He is refining them. Shaving what does not belong, extending a quarter panel just enough, designing one-off billet trim pieces that look like they could have come from the original manufacturer if someone there had better taste and unlimited time. From the outside, this is the golden era. More features in magazines, more trophies at big shows, more experts saying, "Whoever did that knows what they are doing." Inside the shop, the cost of that quality is relentless. Every time a panel gets redone, every hour of block sanding that no one will ever see on camera is money the customer is not actually paying for. Shops in this position often face the same breaking point. Do you start cutting invisible corners to survive? Or do you keep going at full integrity and hope you do not run out of road? Just as Kindig starts to become a name you hear at major events, television comes calling. Producers are hungry for real shops, not the fake ones that exist only long enough to film a season. They want places with genuine backlogs, real customers, and real stakes. Kindig fits that perfectly. The shop is already busy. The projects are serious. The people in the building are the kind of characters you cannot script. Dave with his calm designer's eye and quiet authority. Charity with her mix of warmth and steel running the business. Guys like Kevin, Will, and the rest of the crew who can weld, fabricate, and still explain it in plain language to anyone watching at home. This is the moment where everything could have gone off the rails. Many shops that go on TV slide into the same trap. The network pushes fake deadlines. Drama gets staged. Cars are finished on camera, but quietly come back months later to actually be made safe and reliable. The reputation that took decades to build gets shredded in 3 seasons. The show looks fun. The reality is broken. According to the people who have worked there and customers who have gone through the process, Kindig drew a hard line. Television could film the work. It could not dictate it. The shop would not pretend a 6-month build took 6 weeks just because it made good TV. If a car was not ready, then it was not ready. That meant there were no magical overnight transformations. There were only very long days, very late nights, and a camera crew asking if they could film one more angle of a process the guys had already done 3 times. Bitchin' Rides debuts, and audiences notice the difference immediately. There is tension, but it comes from real problems. A part does not fit. A customer pushes for a deadline that seems impossible. A wiring job has to be redone because someone found a flaw. Dave is not screaming and throwing things across the shop. He is walking around cars with a sharp eye, pointing out curves that need to flow better, asking for a color to be shifted slightly, checking gaps with the same seriousness whether the owner is a local or a deep pockets collector. The success of the show sends more work into the shop. Viewers around the world decide that if they are going to spend serious money on a dream build, they want it to come from the place they have watched on television. Kindig adds more people, builds more infrastructure, and suddenly has to function as 2 things at once: a high-end custom shop with unforgiving standards and a working TV set with schedules, storylines, and behind-the-scenes production pressure. For every hour of bitchin' rides you see, there are countless hours of real work without a single camera pointed at it. That kind of pace has a cost. Being on TV does not reduce the pressure on the shop, it multiplies it. Every technical mistake now has an audience. Every tough conversation can be edited and replayed by strangers who have never touched a welder in their lives. The team has to learn how to do their jobs while having microphones on, lights in their eyes, and producers hovering just off frame wanting to capture the moment. Some people thrive in that environment. Others get exhausted by it. Either way, it is a very new kind of stress. Meanwhile, life outside the shop does not pause. Dave is a husband and a father, as well as a builder and a TV personality. Family birthdays, school events, quiet evenings that start and end on time, all clash with the constant call of work and filming. Health, which was easy to ignore in the early days, starts to speak a little louder. Late nights are harder to recover from. Long days on concrete floors and under cars leave a deeper ache in his body. In the custom car world, there is a familiar grim pattern of what happens when people never listen to those warnings. Some shop owners end up sick, separated from their families, or out of the business entirely, even as their logo continues to show up on reruns. At a certain point, the question for Dave Kindig shifts. It is no longer just, how do I grow this thing? It becomes, how do I keep this thing from swallowing everything that matters? There is a limit to how many seasons you can film at full throttle while still maintaining the level of work that made you worth filming in the first place. There is a limit to how many people a shop can hire without losing its identity. There is a limit to how long one person can be everywhere at once. In the design chair, at the front counter, in the editing bay, at the trade show booth, at home around the table. From the outside, viewers start to notice slower rhythms. Gaps between seasons feel longer. New episodes do not flood in as constantly. The internet begins to do what it always does when it does not have immediate answers. It speculates. Did Dave burn out? Did the shop run into money trouble? Did the network pull back? Did something happen in his personal life? In reality, the story is more complicated and more ordinary at the same time. It is the story of a man trying to keep his standards high, his people paid, his body functioning, and his family intact while navigating a level of attention he never chased for its own sake. That turning point, where growth and survival start pulling in opposite directions, is the real beginning of what happened to Dave Kindig. There is no single explosion or scandal. There are a series of decisions: what to film, what not to film, what projects to accept, what projects to quietly decline, how much of himself to put on camera, and how much to keep for the people at home who do not care about ratings as much as they care about him being present. The turning point for Dave Kindig did not arrive with a big announcement or a dramatic on-camera breakdown. It came slowly, in the way long days begin to feel heavier, in the way small frustrations settle deeper, in the way a man starts to see the difference between being busy and being buried. On paper, Kindig was thriving. The shop was booked with high-end builds. Bitchin' Rides had carved out a rare space as a car show that gearheads actually respected. The brand was on shirts, signs, and booths at huge events. But inside the walls, another kind of math was being worked out. And it had nothing to do with money. It had to do with time, energy, and how much of both one person can give before something cracks. The life cycle of most TV car shops is predictable. Season 1, excitement. Season 2, pressure. Season 3 and beyond, fallout. People quit. Quality drops. The on-screen drama ramps up as the off-screen craft falls apart. In a lot of cases, once the cameras leave, there is not much left. Customers feel burned. The shop's name is damaged. The owner looks 10 years older than when the show started. For a while, it seemed like Kindig had escaped that curse. The build stayed sharp. The crew stayed steady. The show resisted cheap theatrics. That did not mean there was no cost. It just meant the cost was paid in private. Imagine the schedule. There is a full slate of customer builds, each one representing years of someone's savings and trust. There are filming blocks to hit, interviews to give, segments to reshoot because the mic cut out or the angle was wrong. There are car shows and SEMA appearances where people line up to meet Dave, take pictures, ask questions, and talk about how his designs inspired their own projects. There are business meetings behind closed doors about licensing, merchandising, and future seasons. Then there is whatever is left over for home. Dinners, school events, small moments that do not come with a camera crew but mean more than any red carpet. At some point, the balance slipped too far toward everything except rest. It is rare for someone like Dave to talk publicly about burnout, but you can see its edges in the decisions that follow. The shop does not suddenly shut down. The show does not suddenly vanish. Instead, there is a subtle slowing, a deliberate tightening. Projects are chosen more carefully. The sheer volume of commitments gets trimmed. The public appearances are more focused, not because he has stopped caring, but precisely because he wants what remains to still be meaningful. In small moments, the strain started showing in ways no camera could capture. Mornings came earlier, but his energy arrived later. There were days when he would stand in the middle of the shop, surrounded by welders buzzing and grinders throwing sparks, and feel the scene tilt for just a second, like the room was a step ahead of him. Not because he did not love it anymore, but because the sheer volume of responsibility never let up. One customer wanted an update. A producer needed a reshoot. A supplier called with news that a crucial part was delayed. An email pinged about some licensing deal that sounded good, but came with fine print an inch thick. At home, a family member might ask if he could make it to something simple, like a game or a dinner, and he would hear himself say, "I'll try," knowing that try really meant if nothing explodes. Those little compromises, stacked over years, started to weigh more than any single crisis. It was in those quiet realizations, not in any big meltdown, that Dave began to understand something had to give if he wanted to keep doing this for the long haul. There is another layer to this story that viewers often miss. As Kindig became more well-known, it stopped being only about Dave. The shop was now a living organism made up of dozens of people, each with their own families, their own bills, their own futures, tied to how well the business navigated this new level of exposure. Decisions about the show were no longer just personal. If TV demanded something that might hurt the shop's long-term reputation, saying yes could put everyone at risk. If the team took on too many high-profile, low-margin builds just for the screen time, real customers who kept the lights on could end up waiting too long or walking away. Behind the scenes, that meant more structure. What started as a small, loose crew of craftspeople slowly turned into a more organized operation. Schedules, production meetings, clear divisions of who handled what. For some, that was a blessing. It made the chaos feel more manageable. For others, it was an adjustment. The freewheeling, "we will just figure it out as we go" days were gone. In their place was a kind of controlled intensity. Every move counted. Every misstep echoed louder because the audience was bigger. As the shop evolved, so did the show. In early seasons, the novelty was that viewers got to see a real, functioning custom shop from the inside. Over time, the novelty shifted. People already knew who the Kindig crew was. What kept them watching was the craftsmanship, the design choices, and the human moments. A customer was crying when they saw their finished car. A longtime employee talking about what it meant to work there. Dave explained why a certain line on a car made him crazy until it was fixed. Even with that focus, the demands of television remained relentless. Ratings mattered. Story arcs mattered. Networks wanted something they could sell in a crowded landscape. This is where the question what really happened to Dave Kindig becomes tricky, because from the outside, any change in pace looks like a mystery. Viewers notice when seasons are spaced out. They notice when there are fewer promotional clips on social media. They notice when another car show pops up and gets more immediate noise. Without context, people start inventing explanations. Maybe there was a fallout with the network. Maybe the shop ran into big financial trouble. Maybe Dave was sick. Maybe there was some hidden scandal. In reality, what happened is much more ordinary and, in its own way, more impressive. Dave and the people around him made a conscious choice to protect what they had built. That meant saying no to some opportunities that might have flashed bright and faded fast. It meant resisting the pressure to turn the show into something it was never meant to be. It meant recognizing that the very thing that drew people to Kindig in the first place, the consistency of the work and the calm, methodical approach to design, could not survive if everyone in the building stayed at full throttle year after year. As he got older, that awareness extended to his own body. Long before anyone online wondered where he had gone, he was likely asking himself quieter, more serious questions. How many more years can I work this hard on my feet, under deadlines, lifting, crawling around cars, making decisions from morning to night? What happens if I keep ignoring the small signals that something needs to change? In the car world, it is common to see legendary builders push themselves straight past the point of no return. Heart trouble, stress-related issues, complications that arrive suddenly but were building for years. The ones who manage to keep going are often the ones who adapt before it is too late. There is also the simple human reality of wanting more from life than just work, no matter how passionate that work is. As his children grew up and became more involved in the business, the dynamic shifted. Kindig was no longer just his hustle. It was a family legacy. That brought pride, but also responsibility. Handing over parts of the operation, letting other people take the lead on certain decisions, can be difficult for any founder, especially one whose name is on every sign. But it is also the only way to make sure the shop can outlast a single person's energy. So what did Dave actually do? He pulled some of his attention away from being everywhere at once and put it into more focused roles. He leaned harder into the parts of the job that only he could do: high-level design, final approvals, relationships with key customers and partners. Other trusted people in the shop took on more of the day-to-day management and communication. Instead of being the bottleneck for every single choice, he became the guiding hand, the person who could step in and say yes or no at the moments that mattered most. As for the show, it settled into a rhythm that was sustainable. Not a constant year-round presence that would wring everyone dry, but a series that could be shot, produced, aired, and then allowed to breathe while the shop got back to its core. Building cars away from the constant glare. In between seasons, instead of chasing every media opportunity, the team could catch up on long-term projects, experiment with new ideas, and rest enough to come back on camera without faking their enthusiasm. Meanwhile, the brand expanded in quieter ways. You see Kindig designs on wheels, parts, and collaborations that bring his aesthetic to people who may never be able to afford a full custom build. You see the shop's presence at major events, not always as a headlining spectacle, but as a steady, respected force. Customers still send cars to Utah from all over the country and even beyond. There are shop tours, open houses, and interactions with fans that do not always get filmed, but matter just as much to the people who live them. If you look closely, what really happened to Dave Kindig is not a fall from grace. It is a controlled descent from a pace that was unsustainable into a more measured, mature version of the same passion. The fire is still there. You can see it every time he walks around a nearly finished build and notices something tiny that no one else would have caught. You can hear it when he talks about the responsibility of cutting up a rare car and making it better, not worse. The difference is that he no longer has to prove every day that he can outwork everyone in the room. He already did that for decades. For the audience, that shift can feel like distance. You are used to seeing him weekly, on demand, in constant rotation. When that slows, it is natural to wonder if something is wrong. In truth, the opposite may be the case. A slower, more deliberate Dave is a healthier one. A shop that does not chase constant exposure is often a shop where people still care about the long game. It is easy to burn out fast and go loud. It is harder to stay good for a very long time. There is also the question of legacy. At this point in his life and career, Dave is not just thinking about the next episode or even the next car. He is thinking about what Kindig will mean when he is not the one unlocking the door each morning. That is where teaching, mentoring, and system building come in. Passing down not just skills, but standards. Making sure that the next wave of builders inside those walls understands that good enough is never good enough. That a Kindig car is not defined by a TV edit, but by the way all the panels line up when the cameras are gone and the owner is alone with it in their garage. So when you see less of him online, or when a season takes longer than you expected to drop, the explanation is not some dramatic collapse. It is quieter and, in many ways, more admirable. He is still working, still designing, still walking around cars and pointing at invisible lines that only he seems to see at first. He is just doing it in a way that leaves room for the rest of his life, too. In the end, what really happened to Dave Kindig is this. The young man who once worked himself to the edge just to keep his shop alive became a grown man who realized that survival is not only about money or fame. It is about health, about family, about the integrity of your work over time. He built a name without television. He used television without letting it completely rewrite who he was. And when the cost of constant exposure started climbing too high, he chose something that many never do. He chose to step back just enough to keep going. That is not a downfall. That is a calculated move by someone who understands that true success is not just being seen, but lasting long enough to keep creating at the level you believe in. If you enjoy learning the real stories behind your favorite automotive icons, make sure you subscribe and tap the bell icon. This helps you stay updated and helps our channel continue creating content that adds real value.